Okay, kick us off with this. Did you know the oldest verifiable brewery, we're talking 13,000 years ago, found in a prehistoric burial site in Israel?
Wow, 13,000 years.
That's
Really something.
right. Or how about the world's oldest surviving wine, found in Spain inside a Roman urn from the 1st century?
From Roman times,
Yeah.
still liquid. Incredible.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into alcoholic beverages, and it's not just about, what's in your glass currently.
No, it's much bigger than that. It's the history, the culture, the societal impact. It's surprisingly complex.
That's the goal here. We want to give you a really solid, nuanced understanding of this whole global phenomenon, drawing from some pretty comprehensive sources we've gathered.
Yeah, we'll be looking at how alcohol has shaped cultures, driven economies, even influenced health and law. Lots of connections to make.
You'll get those aha moments, hopefully. We're digging into some extensive material, including that really detailed Wikipedia entry on alcoholic beverages.
It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
So that first fact about the 13,000-year-old brewery.
Right. Let's unpack that. The sheer antiquity is just mind-blowing. We're talking about intentionally fermented drinks way back in the Neolithic period.
So not just happy accidents. They knew what they were doing.
Seems like it. That brewery near Haifa in Israel, carved into a cave floor, had traces of wheat and barley. It suggests beer might have been, part of ritual feasts.
Ritualistic used that early on. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just beer, right?
Not at all. Look at Jaihu in China, 7,000 to 5,600 BC. Ancient pottery shows they were making grape and hawthorn fruit wine, honey mead, and rice beer.
That parallel development is what gets me. Different cultures, different parts of the world, all figuring out fermentation around similar times.
It does suggest something universal, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got the earliest solid winemaking evidence from Georgia, 6,000 to 5,800 BCE.
Okay.
Then flip over to Iran, get in Tepe, and you find clear chemical evidence of barley beer around 3,500 BCE.
Barley beer. Okay.
And the Celts. They were apparently making cider as early as 3,000 BCE.
Cider, too.
Yeah.
And we know the Greeks loved their wine.
Oh, definitely. Wine at breakfast, wine at symposia, those formal drinking parties. It was central.
But, okay, back to that record breaker. The Roman wine.
The Carmona wine urn, yeah.
From the 1st century AD, containing the world's oldest surviving wine.
It's just staggering. Found in a Roman necropolis in Spain.
And it beats the old record holder, the Spire wine bottle.
By 3 centuries.
Yeah.
A huge leap. Imagine finding wine from the actual Roman Empire.
Unbelievable. So, moving forward a bit in history, let's talk distillation.
Right. A major turning point.
Yeah.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, distillation wasn't just about making stronger drinks.
No. What else?
It was a significant chemical innovation. It had applications in medicine, alchemy. It was cutting-edge science for the time.
And who was leading that charge initially?
Medieval Muslim chemists, figures like Jabir ibn al-Ayyan, al-Razi, al-Kindi, they experimented extensively with distillation.
Okay, so it starts in the Middle East.
Then the knowledge travels. It reaches Italy by the mid-12th century.
And spreads from there.
Exactly. Throughout Europe by the early 14th century. And by the 15th century, it's in Ireland and Scotland.
The beginnings of whiskey, maybe?
Well, primarily it was for aquavitae back then, water of life, used often for medicinal purposes.
So medicinal. Interesting. And this ties into the early modern period too, right? Alcohol wasn't just recreational.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was essential. Think about England's 1690 Act encouraging distillation from corn.
What was the goal there?
To boost domestic production, sure,
Yeah.
but maybe also to provide a safer alternative to potentially bad water and stimulate the grain market.
Right, because in the 13 colonies in America, drinking beer or wine was often seen as safer than water sources, which could be contaminated.
Exactly. And by the early 19th century in the U.S., hard liquor was extremely common. It was part of daily life for many.
So what does this all mean? Alcohol was tied up in public safety, but also clearly economics.
Absolutely. And that economic aspect raises an important question. How have things like taxation and transport shaped alcohol production and use, sometimes dramatically?
You mean like conflict?
Precisely. Take the Whiskey Rebellion in the U.S., 1791 to 1794.
Yes. That was the tax protest.
A violent one. It was triggered by the first federal tax on domestic product whiskey.
Why whiskey specifically?
Well, whiskey and rum were easier to transport over rough terrain than, say, bulky grain or even beer, and they didn't spoil easily. For farmers on the frontier, turning grain into whiskey was a way to get their product to market. It was currency almost.
So the tax hit them hard, led to armed conflict. Wow.
It shows how deeply intertwined economics, logistics, and alcohol were, even back then.
And it wasn't the only alcohol-fueled conflict, was it? There was something in Australia.
The Rum Rebellion, 1808. Australia's only actual military coup.
A coup over rum.
Basically, yes. It happened in the British penal colony of New South Wales. The military officers, known as the Rum Corps, had gained a sort of monopoly on the illicit but widespread rum trade. When the governor tried to curb their power, they overthrew him.
It's fascinating seeing alcohol as the direct flashpoint for a military takeover.
It highlights the power and value attached to it. And this control aspect, it leads governments to step in, often for mixed reasons.
Mixed reasons like what?
Well, look at alcohol monopolies. Sweden created one in the city of Falun in 1850.
Why?
The stated goal was to prevent overconsumption and reduce the profit motive in selling alcohol, sort of a public health measure. It went nationwide later, in 1905.
Okay, so public health on one side.
But then look at the Russian Empire. They set up a state vodka monopoly in 1894.
For public health.
Not primarily. It became a massive source of revenue for the Tsarist government. So you see that tension. Control for social good versus control for state profit.
That's a really interesting duality. Public health versus revenue. And this control idea, it swung pretty hard the other way too, didn't it? Towards bans.
Oh, definitely. The 19th century saw the rise of powerful temperance movements, especially in the US, the UK, Canada, Scandinavia, even India.
People pushing back against alcohol consumption.
Strongly. And it led to actual national prohibitions. Canada had one briefly, 1918, 1920. Norway banned spirits for a while, 1919, 1926. Finland had a full ban from 1919 to 1932.
And the big one, the U.S.
The U.S. prohibition, 1920 to 1933. A huge social experiment. And interestingly, provincial prohibition still exists in parts of India today, started back in 1948.
Okay, let's unpack this. From basically unregulated use in some eras to total bans in others, societies have really struggled with where to draw the line on alcohol.
Absolutely. It's a constant negotiation.
So maybe we should quickly break down the actual drinks themselves. We talk about beer, wine, spirits. What are the basics?
Sure. Generally, you can divide alcoholic beverages into three main classes: beers, wines, and spirits.
And the alcohol content varies quite a bit.
Yeah, typically from around 3% alcohol by volume, or ABV, up to maybe 50% for common spirits, sometimes higher. Anything under 0.5% ABV is usually considered non-alcoholic.
Okay, so let's start with the oldest category, the fermented ones.
Right. Beer is probably the big one globally, the most consumed alcoholic beverage.
Made from grains, usually barley, right? With hops.
Exactly. Fermented from a grain mash, often naturally carbonated. And interestingly, if you take that fermented mash and distill it, you get spirits.
Ah, okay. And wine.
Wine is most often from fermented grapes, typically involving a longer fermentation and aging process than beer. Usually lands between 9% and 16% ABV.
And that includes sparkling wines like champagne?
Yep, champagne, cava, prosecco, those are all wines. Plus fruit wines made from things other than grapes, like plums or cherries.
What about cider?
Cider is fermented fruit juice, most commonly apple. If it's made from pears, it's technically called perry.
Perry, okay. Never knew that. And mead, that's the honey one.
That's the one, honey wine. Fermented honey and water. The ABV can range dramatically, from quite low, like 3%, up to over 20%.
Wow, quite a range.
It's very versatile.
And there are drinks specific to certain regions, too, like pulque.
Right. Pulque is a traditional Mesoamerican drink. It's made from the fermented sap, the honey water of the maguey plant.
And that can be distilled further.
Exactly. Distilled pulque, or the agave heart itself, and you get tequila or mezcal.
Fascinating connection. And rice wine.
Hugely popular across East, Southeast, and South Asia. Examples like Japanese sake, Chinese huangju, Korean xiangju, all based on fermented rice.
So many variations just within fermented drinks. Is there anything else in that category?
Well, there's a curious one called fermented water.
Fermented water? What's that?
It's basically just sugar, yeast, and water, fermented to pretty high ABV, like 15, 17%. The point is to produce ethanol with almost no other flavors.
Huh. Why would you make that?
Sometimes as a base for adding flavors later, or perhaps in situations where other ingredients aren't available. It just shows the core simplicity of fermentation.
Right. Sugar plus yeast, alcohol. Okay, so that covers fermented drinks. What about distilled beverages? The spirits?
Spirits are made by taking a fermented liquid and concentrating the ethanol through distillation. They're generally unsweetened and have a minimum alcohol content, usually around 20% ABV by law in many places.
And common examples we'd know?
Things like whiskey or whiskey vodka, often around 40%, ABV brandy, gin, rum, tequila, but also others like Chinese baijiu or Korean soju.
Okay. Is there a difference between, say, brandy and a fortified wine like port?
Good question, yes. Brandy is a spirit distilled from wine. Fortified wine, like port or sherry or vermouth, is a wine that has had a distilled spirit, usually brandy, added to it.
Ah, okay. Added versus distilled from. Makes sense. You also mentioned something called rectified spirit.
Right, or neutral grain spirit. That's ethanol that's been distilled repeatedly to become highly purified, often up to 95% ABV or even higher.
95%.
Yeah. The key is that it's neutral and lacks the flavors from the original fermented mash or any added flavorings.
What's that used for?
It's a base for making other spirits like gin or vodka, used in blended whiskeys, in liqueurs, mixed drinks, medicinal tinctures, even as a solvent.
Okay, so incredibly versatile. So we have these broad categories,
Yeah.
fermentation, distillation, but what makes different wines or whiskeys taste so different?
A lot of it comes down to tiny chemical compounds produced during fermentation and aging, often called congeners.
Congeners, okay. What do they do?
They include things like different types of alcohols besides ethanol, esters, aldehydes. They're responsible for much of the specific taste and aroma profiles of alcoholic drinks.
So they're the flavor compounds, essentially.
Largely, yes,
Hmm.
particularly in distilled spirits. They also contribute to the character of non-distilled drinks like wine and beer. And, interestingly,
Yes.
there's research suggesting these congeners might also play a role in hangovers. Drinks with higher congener levels, like darker liquors or red wine, are sometimes associated with worse hangovers for some people.
Ah, the dreaded hangover science. What about tannins in wine? Are those congeners?
Tannins are a type of polyphenol, slightly different, but also crucial. They come from grape skins, seeds, stems, and oak barrels. They add bitterness, that drying sensation in your mouth, complexity, structure. They're vital for how a wine tastes and ages.
Okay, so the chemistry is complex. This raises an important question then. How do these compounds affect not just flavor, but our actual physical experience?
That's a huge area of study. Distillation, for example, removes many congeners compared to the original fermented mash. That's why vodka, which is highly distilled and filtered, has a very different sensory profile and potentially different physiological effects than, say, heavily peated Scotch whiskey aged for years in oak.
Right. It's not just about the ethanol percentage.
Not at all. And beyond these core types, you have the whole world of mixed drinks.
Cocktails, basically.
Cocktails, highballs, anything with 2 or more ingredients, usually including alcohol. Then there are things like alka-pops or coolers.
Those ready-to-drink options?
Yeah, usually lower ABV, maybe 3–7%, often malt or wine-based with added fruit juice or flavorings. Popular for convenience.
And I think you mentioned alcohol powder. Is that real?
It is, though it's kind of a niche product. It generally uses microencapsulation. You add water and it becomes an alcoholic drink. There have been regulatory hurdles and debates about it.
Huh. Seems potentially problematic.
And one last term, maybe well drink.
Yeah. If you order a well drink or a rail drink at a bar, it just means a basic mixed drink like a rum and coke or gin and tonic, made with the house's standard, usually lower cost liquors, the ones kept in the well or speed rail right in front of the bartender for quick access.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've covered the chemistry, the types of drinks,
Yeah.
but alcohol's role goes way beyond just the liquid itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Its integration into social activities and culture is immense.
So what does this all mean? Alcohol isn't just a beverage. It's woven into social rituals, community life, even tourism.
Exactly. Think about activities. Drinking games have existed since antiquity. Drinking songs are a whole genre.
True. And the places we drink are so varied.
Totally. German beer gardens, Greek ouzeries serving ouzo and mez, Mexican pulquerias, those fun Polynesian-themed tiki bars, sophisticated wine bars, the list goes on.
And festivals, beer festivals, wine festivals celebrating the harvest. Right. Plus the whole culture around professional tasting beer sommeliers, wine sommeliers with specialized language and rating system.
And people travel for this stuff now, right? Beer tourism, wine tourism.
Definitely. Craft beer tourism, eno-tourism, wine tourism, visiting breweries and wineries, tasting at the source. It's a big industry.
It really shows how central it is. What about alcohol's role with food?
Oh, it's incredibly diverse there, too. It goes
Yeah.
way beyond just pairing wine with dinner.
Like aperitifs and digestives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Aperitifs, usually dry, served before a meal to stimulate the appetite. Think Campari or dry vermouth. Digestives served after to supposedly aid digestion, things like brandy, herbal liqueurs, or sweet fortified wines.
And cooking with alcohol.
Hugely important as a flavor agent. Wine, beer, spirits add depth and acidity to sauces and dishes. The ethanol itself acts as a solvent, helping to release flavor compounds from other ingredients.
Like in a vodka sauce, maybe?
Perfect example. Or flambeing for dramatic effect and flavor. Plus, aging spirits in oak barrels or infusing them with fruits and herbs is often done specifically with culinary uses in mind.
Has alcohol been used for preserving food, too?
Historically, yes. Think fruits preserved in brandy. Its high concentration can inhibit microbial growth.
And some cultures even have specific drinking foods.
They do. Special terms exist, like anju in Korean cuisine, kapklaim in Thai, sakana in Japanese. These are snacks or dishes specifically meant to be eaten alongside alcoholic drinks.
That's interesting. And vinegar, is that related?
It is. Vinegar literally means sour wine. It's made by a double fermentation process. First, sugar is converted to ethanol, just like making wine or beer. Then specific bacteria convert that ethanol into acetic acid.
So you need alcohol first to make vinegar.
Exactly. You can make vinegar from wine, cider, beer, rice wine, hence apple cider vinegar, rice vinegar, malt vinegar, etc.
And the classic wine and food pairing.
That's evolved from just matching local food with local wine into a whole art and science, often guided by sommeliers, aiming to enhance the dining experience by finding complementary or contrasting flavors.
So from drink to ingredient to preservative, it's deeply embedded in food culture. What about the more ritualistic or spiritual side?
That's another incredibly deep connection throughout history and across cultures.
How so?
Well, alcoholic beverages are often traditional offerings for certain folk saints, like Maximón in Guatemala or Santa Muerte in Mexico, figures sometimes associated with marginalized communities.
Offerings to saints, okay.
And the practice of libation, ritually pouring out a liquid offering. That's ancient. You see it in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome. Offering wine or beer to gods or spirits or in memory of the dead.
Does that still happen?
Yes, in various forms. For example, some indigenous cultures in the Andes, like Quechua and Aymara communities, might offer ticha, a corn beer, to Pachamama, Mother Earth. The Aztecs had octli pulque rituals.
And in major world religions.
Christianity is a key example, with sacramental wine used in the Eucharist or Holy Communion. It's usually just a symbolic sip representing the blood of Christ.
Does the type of wine matter?
The Catholic Church traditionally requires natural grape wine. Lutheran traditions also typically use wine, though some congregations might offer grape juice as an alternative.
And outside of direct religious ceremony, you mentioned tinctures earlier.
Right. Tinctures are extracts, usually of plants, dissolved in ethanol. The alcohol acts as a solvent to extract compounds and as a preservative. They've been a mainstay of herbal medicine for centuries.
It's incredible how alcohol weaves through spirituality, offerings, medicine. It really touches almost every aspect of human society.
It really does. Which brings us inevitably to the modern world and the complex realities of alcohol today.
You mean the health aspect?
That's a huge part of it, yeah. Especially considering the scale. The global alcoholic drinks industry was worth over $1.5 trillion in 2017.
Trillion. Wow. And how many people actually drink?
Estimates suggest about a third of all humans currently drink alcohol. In the U.S., back in 2015, something like 86% of adults said they'd had alcohol at some point.
So it's incredibly widespread.
Massively widespread. And while animals can definitely be affected by alcohol if they ingest it, humans are the only species we know of that intentionally produces it on a large scale.
But then there's the downside. We know it's a depressant.
Correct. It slows down the central nervous system. In low doses, that can feel like euphoria, reduced anxiety, increased sociability, reasons people enjoy it.
But higher doses
Lead to drunkenness, loss of coordination, impaired judgment, stupor, unconsciousness, and potentially death from alcohol poisoning or accidents.
and the long-term effects.
Those are serious. Chronic heavy use can lead to alcoholism, physical dependence, withdrawal syndromes, liver disease, cardiovascular problems, neurological damage.
And cancer, right. That link seems to be getting more attention.
It is, and it's critical. Alcohol is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a Group 1 carcinogen, the highest risk category, alongside things like tobacco smoke and asbestos.
Group 1, that's serious.
Very. And the World Health Organization put out a strong statement in 2023. They basically said, the risk to the drinker's health starts from the first drop of any alcoholic beverage. There's no safe amount, according to them, when it comes to cancer risk.
No safe amount. That's a powerful statement.
It is. Acetaldehyde, which is a primary metabolite when your body processes alcohol, is itself a carcinogen. The risk increases with the amount consumed.
Is public awareness high on this, the alcohol-cancer link?
Generally, no. Especially in places like the U.S., awareness is quite low compared to, say, the link between smoking and cancer. That's why you're seeing calls now for cancer warning labels on alcohol packaging, similar to tobacco warnings.
That WHO stance, though, risk starts from the first drop, that really challenges how most people think about social drinking, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It forces a difficult conversation about balancing cultural norms and widespread use against significant, perhaps underestimated health risks.
That's a massive challenge, especially communicating that risk effectively. When alcohol is so deeply ingrained, how do you even start?
It's incredibly tough. It requires shifting perceptions, making that risk connection as clear and accepted as it is for smoking. It's not just about information. It's about changing deeply rooted cultural attitudes, a huge public health undertaking.
Yeah, I can see that. And this inherent tension naturally leads to laws and regulations.
Exactly. Because of the potential harms and the social impact, alcohol is heavily regulated pretty much everywhere.
Regulating everything from making it to drinking it?
Pretty much. Laws cover manufacturing standards, packaging, mandatory labeling like ADV content, distribution licenses, where and when it can be sold, who can buy it, the legal drinking age.
Which varies quite a bit globally.
It does, typically between 15 and 21. In the U.S., it's uniformly 21 across all states.
And sales are often restricted.
Often, yes. Only through licensed stores, or state-run monopoly stores in some places, or licensed bars and restaurants, pubs. Taxation is also a major form of control and revenue generation.
And limits on when you can buy it.
Yep. Restrictions on hours or days of sale are common. Think of blue laws that used to restrict Sunday sales, or the concept of last call in bars before closing time.
Some places go further, right? Banning sales to people already drunk.
Yes, that's common responsible service practice, often mandated by law. And some countries prohibit alcohol entirely, either for religious reasons, like those following strict interpretations of Sharia law, or for public health policy, like during historical periods of prohibition.
Okay, so this whole web of laws and the nature of alcohol itself, it seems to create its own world of related crime, too.
It certainly does. The regulation and criminalization have spawned various illegal activities throughout history.
Like rum running.
Classic example of illegal smuggling, especially prominent during Prohibition in the U.S.
Or wine fraud.
That's adulterating wine, maybe mixing it with cheaper substances, mislabeling vintages or origins. It still happens.
And moonshine.
That's illegally produced distilled spirits, often made secretly, sometimes by the light of the moon, historically made to avoid taxes.
Is it dangerous?
It can be extremely dangerous. Improper distillation can fail to remove methanol, which is highly toxic and can cause blindness or death, or sometimes toxic adulterants are added. The people who smuggled it were the runners or bootleggers.
Okay. What about a sly grog shop?
That's an older term, mainly Australian and New Zealand, for an unlicensed place selling alcohol, often of dubious quality.
And even in prisons.
Yeah, the phenomenon of pruno or prison hooch, inmates improvising alcoholic beverages from whatever ingredients they can scrounge, like fruit, sugar, and bread yeast.
Wow. And then there are the crimes related to consumption.
Right. Drunk driving DUI or DWI, driving while impaired, is a major public safety issue globally, with strict laws and penalties.
And just being drunk in public?
Public intoxication laws vary a lot. In some places, it's an offense itself. In others, it might fall under public nuisance laws or relate to open container ordinances prohibiting drinking in public spaces.
It really is a complex world. It even supports specific professions.
Absolutely. Beyond brewers and distillers, you have specialized roles like beer sommeliers, wine sommeliers, professional winemakers, cocktail bartenders or mixologists, even specific serving staff, like cocktail waitresses in some venues.
And specialized equipment, too.
Oh, yeah. Things like a beer engine for cask ale, margarita machines, even obscure tools like port tongs used for opening old bottles of port wine with fragile corks by heating the neck of the bottle. It shows the depth of the industry and culture around it.
What a journey we've taken today. Seriously, from evidence of beer in, like, prehistoric burial site.
Right, 13,000 years ago.
To surviving Roman wine, the secrets of medieval distillation, those colonial rebellions over rum and whiskey.
Modern government monopolies, the rise and fall of Prohibition.
All the way to understanding the different types of drinks, the congeners, the tannins, and landing on the really complex health questions and legal frameworks of today.
We've seen it as a cultural cornerstone, a food ingredient, a religious offering, and this heavily regulated, sometimes controversial substance.
So hopefully you listening now have a much richer perspective on alcohol. You can see its incredible historical depth, its cultural weight, the science behind it all, and the real challenges it poses today.
It's been part of the human story for so long. Which leads to a final thought, maybe. Considering these ancient origins and how its role keeps evolving, driven by science, culture, law, what do you think the next big shift will be in humanity's relationship with alcohol?
That's a fascinating question to ponder. Will it be driven by those stark health warnings, new non-alcoholic alternatives, changing social norms?
Or something else entirely we haven't even considered yet? Definitely food for thought.
Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Hello.
Today, we're plunging into a real mystery, one that's really captured imaginations for ages, the Mokele-mbembe.
Ah, yes, the Congo creature.
Exactly. And this isn't just, any old legend. We're talking about something described as, well, everything from a spirit to a reptile, even maybe a living dinosaur. A sauropod specifically.
It's an incredible story, isn't it? It really pulls together so many threads, ancient folklore from Bantu mythologies, those early sort of colonial explorations.
And then it gets tangled up with modern cryptozoology, that's the hunt for hidden animals, and perhaps surprisingly, young Earth creationism too.
Right, which is a whole other layer. Basically became this focal point for explorers, scientists, even pop culture creators. Everyone seemed fascinated.
So our mission today, as always, is to unpack the sources you've provided. We want to pull out the key insights, the surprising facts about Mokele-mbembe.
Yeah, give you the essential rundown, the full scope of this legend and the quests it sparked.
Let's jump right in then. Where does this story actually begin?
Well, its roots are deep in several Bantu mythologies. The name itself, Mokele-mbembe, means something like one who stops the flow of rivers.
Interesting. And the first recorded mention, I saw something about 1776.
That's right, yeah. Some records dated back that far. And incredibly, even listed under parent, Sauropoda, the dinosaur group.
Wow. So the dinosaur connection was being made, or at least suggested, centuries ago. But it really bursts onto the Western scene later, doesn't it?
It does, largely thanks to a German captain, Ludwig Freiherr von Stein zu Lausnitz.
Von Stein, right, 1913, surveying German colonies in Cameroon.
Precisely. He starts hearing these persistent stories from locals about an enormous reptile. And he didn't just dismiss them. He included a detailed description in his official report.
What details did he include? That's what really set the stage, wasn't it?
Absolutely. He described it as brownish gray with smooth skin. Size-wise, think an elephant, maybe a hippopotamus.
Okay, big.
Big. And a long, very flexible neck, that's key. Plus, only one tooth, but a very long one. Though he noted some people said it was a horn.
A tooth or a horn. And the tail.
Muscular, like an alligator's. It was said to attack canoes, killing the crews, interestingly, but not eating them.
Strange detail.
Isn't it? And supposedly lived in caves along the riverbanks. Diet-wise, purely vegetarian.
And he mentioned a specific plant it ate.
Yeah, a type of liana, a vine with white blossoms, milky sap, and these apple-like fruits. He was even shown a path supposedly made by it, though he admitted tracks were hard to distinguish.
So von Stein was cautious, but he seemed to believe the stories were consistent, coming from different reliable sources.
It did. He seemed genuinely perplexed, but felt the consistency lent credibility. But there's a twist.
Oh.
Yeah, later on, in 1929, another science writer, Wilhelm Bolsche, claimed von Stein actually didn't believe it was a real animal. Bolsche suggested von Stein thought it was just local folklore.
Okay, so right from the start, there's this ambiguity about what the original source, von Stein, truly believed. Interpretation versus fact.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, Mokele-mbembe wasn't the only strange creature story coming out of Central Africa back then.
Right, there were others, like the Unsanga.
Yes, Lieutenant Paul Gratz wrote about that in 1911 from Lake Bangweulu. He called it a degenerate saurian, said it had no scales, clawed toes, even claimed he'd seen strips of its skin.
And the Emelantuka, similar descriptions, right? Elegant size, smooth skin, horn, or tooth.
Very similar. And Alfred Elisha Smith mentioned the Jagonini in Gabon, too. So these kinds of legends were widespread before Mokele-mbembe became famous.
But they all sort of got viewed through this dinosaur lens once von Stein's report gained traction, particularly in the West.
Precisely. And that timing is crucial. The early 20th century, especially the 1910s, was peak dinosaur mania in Europe and North America.
Ah, the Brontosaurus era, like those old Charles R. Knight paintings showing them wading in swamps.
Exactly. Those images were powerful, even if inaccurate by modern standards. So when these reports from Africa surfaced, the media likely jumped on the sauropod angle. It made for a great story.
A sort of perfect storm of folklore, exploration, and pop culture fascination.
And this is where it intersects more formally with cryptozoology and significantly young Earth creationism later in the mid-20th century.
Right. The idea being if a dinosaur is still alive, maybe evolution or the geological timescale is wrong.
That's the argument some proponents make. Paleontologist Donald Prothero is quite critical here. He says the search for Mokele-mbembe became part of the effort by creationists to overthrow the theory of evolution by any means possible.
He even says the only people looking are creationist ministers, not wildlife biologists. That's quite a strong statement.
It is, and it definitely raises questions about the underlying motivations for some of the expeditions that followed. You have to ask, what were they really hoping to find?
Which brings us to the actual searches. The big ones were probably the Powell-Mackall expeditions in 1980 and 81.
Yeah, biologist Roy McCall teamed up with explorer James Powell. They went deep into the Congo, interviewed lots of local people.
Did they find anything? Physical evidence?
No hard evidence. But McCall really argued for its existence based on what he felt were consistent eyewitness accounts. He wrote a book about it in '87.
Did he acknowledge the, let's say, romantic aspect of the quest?
He did, actually. He admitted his investigation was tinged with some romanticism, but he insisted the intent was scientifically serious.
But Prothero had criticisms of McCall's work too, right?
Oh, definitely. Prothero argues McCall wasn't really qualified for that specific kind of zoological field research. His background was virology.
Different skill set.
Very. And Prothero suggests McCall might have accepted the eyewitness stories too readily, maybe not fully considering exaggeration or, people perhaps wanting attention or financial gain.
Or maybe just telling the foreigners what they seem to want to hear.
That's also a possibility Prothero raises. And he notes McCall seemed dismissive of locals who denied knowing about the creature. It really highlights the difficulties in that kind of cross-cultural investigation.
Absolutely. Were there other major expeditions or claims around that time?
There were. Marcelin Agnagna, a Congolese zoologist, claimed he filmed it in 1983.
Really? What happened to the footage?
Well, supposedly the film did not develop properly or was unusable because the camera was set incorrectly. Prothero found the whole thing suspicious, noting Agnagna's story changed over time and wasn't backed up by others on the trip.
Sounds convenient. Any others?
A Scottish explorer, William Billy Gibbons, led expeditions in '85 and '92. Again, Prothero questions his motives, pointing to creationist leanings and maybe less than rigorous scientific methods.
And there was a photo.
Journalist Rory Nugent published one in his 1993 book, claiming it showed the creature. Prothero and others looked at it and suggested it was most likely just a floating log or debris.
So lots of claims, lots of expeditions, but still no conclusive proof. What about more recently in the 21st century?
The search hasn't entirely stopped. An interesting bit came from a 2001 BBC documentary, Congo.
What did they find?
They showed an illustrated wildlife guide to some Biaka people. When they got to the rhinoceros page, the Biaka identified that as Mokele-mbembe.
A rhinoceros.
Yeah. It led to the theory that maybe the legend is a kind of folk memory, possibly mixed with mythology, recalling a time when black rhinos were actually more common in that part of the Congo basin.
That's a plausible explanation, linking it to a known, albeit locally extinct, animal.
It seems quite likely. Then in 2016, a South African documentary crew went to the Likwala swamp area. They collected more stories, but they really highlighted how blurry the line was for some locals between the creature as a physical being versus a sort of metaphysical entity. Some said it was still around, others said it died years ago.
So the story itself is evolving, changing within the local culture.
Seems that way. And one more Danish expedition in 2018 went to Lake Telly, the supposed hotspot.
Led by a count, I believe.
That's right, Lensgreve Adam Christopher Knuth. They spent time there with the film crew. No cryptid, unfortunately.
But they found something else, didn't they?
They did. A genuine scientific discovery. A new species of green algae.
So the hunt for a mythical dinosaur-like creature led to new pond scum.
Well, new pond scum, yes. It's something.
It is something. So, summing up the scientific view then, where does that leave us?
Overwhelmingly, the scientific and historical consensus is skepticism. There's just no physical evidence, no bones, no teeth, no clear photos or videos, no DNA.
Despite all the searches and the technology we have now, like satellite imagery.
Exactly. We can spot elephant herds from space, but not a giant sauropod analog. It seems unlikely. And the eyewitness accounts are too varied and contradictory.
So the black rhinoceros theory remains the most accepted explanation.
It's certainly the most grounded one, yeah. And skeptics like Ben Radford, Daniel Loxton, and Prothero trace the modern legend's launch specifically back to Carl Hagenbeck.
Hagenbeck, the zoo guy from 1909.
That's him. In his book Beasts and Men, he speculated, based purely on legends and recent fossil finds, that maybe sauropods could still be alive in remote Africa. He had no proof, just speculation.
But the press ran with it.
Oh, yeah. Papers like the Washington Post picked it up. And according to these skeptics, that really launched what would become the modern cryptozoological legend of Mokele-mbembe.
So not genuine native accounts initially driving the Western interest, but rather Western speculation projected onto very local stories.
That's their argument, that the specific sauropod in the Congo idea wasn't really from the source initially, but was a distillation of many creatively varied stories from widely separated regions filtered through Hagenbeck's widely publicized guess.
And the final nail in the coffin, argument-wise.
Just the sheer lack of evidence after centuries of contact, countless expeditions, and modern surveillance. If something that large was there, you'd think we'd have found something by now.
It seems logical, and yet the idea persists, doesn't it? Especially in popular culture.
Oh, absolutely. That's maybe the most fascinating part now. Regardless of whether it's real, Mokele-mbembe has definitely made its mark.
It really has. I mean, you see it everywhere. There's even a chess opening variation named after it.
Is there really? I didn't know that one.
Yeah. And movies, obviously. Baby. Secret of the Lost Legend is a classic example.
And it got a mention as one of the titans in the recent Godzilla movies, too.
Video games as well. Uncharted Waters, Metal Gear Solid, Peace Walker.
Books galore, cryptid hunters, Mortal Engines. Even Dom Joly wrote about searching for it in Scary Monsters and Super Creeps.
It pops up in music, gets mentioned on podcasts like Joe Rogan's. It's kind of woven into the fabric of mystery creature lore.
Even in shared fictional universes, like the World of Darkness role-playing games with their Mokele were reptiles, or the SCP Foundation, which classifies a version of it.
It's incredible, really. The cultural footprint is undeniable, far exceeding any actual evidence for the creature itself.
It just shows the power of a compelling story, doesn't it? Especially one involving dinosaurs and unexplored places.
Absolutely. So we've journeyed from Bantu mythology through colonial reports, cryptozoology, creationism, countless expeditions, scientific skepticism, and all the way into movies and video games.
Quite the trip for a creature that likely doesn't exist.
Indeed. Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought, perhaps. In this age where we're drowning in information, how do we navigate that line, the line between a really gripping narrative that sparks our imagination and the verifiable facts that, well, shape our understanding of reality?
That's the core question, isn't it? What is it about these stories of the unknown, like Mokele-mbembe, that holds such enduring fascination for us? What stands out to you? How do we grapple with those huge figures in thought? The ones who completely change how we see things, but whose own lives are, well, messy, controversial.
It's a tough question, absolutely. And today we're diving deep into one of the biggest and maybe most perplexing examples, Martin Heidegger.
Right, a German philosopher, often called one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. But there's that huge shadow, isn't there? His connection to Nazism.
Exactly. So our goal here is to navigate that difficult terrain. We want to understand the core of his philosophy, which was genuinely groundbreaking.
And also unpack the facts, the unavoidable truths about his involvement with the Nazi Party. We're drawing everything directly from the sources you've provided us, this rich compilation of information on his life, his work, the whole controversy.
Yeah, this isn't about judging him from our standpoint today, but about really trying to get an informed understanding based on the evidence.
Okay, so where do we start? His beginnings.
Let's do that. Let's trace the path. He was born back in 1889, rural place called Maeskirch in Germany. Humble background. His father was a sexton, the church caretaker.
Raised Roman Catholic, I understand.
Yes. And he actually started training for the priesthood in 1909 entered a Jesuit seminary.
But that didn't last long.
Incredibly brief. We're talking weeks. He was discharged, apparently, due to heart trouble.
Wow. Okay, so that's a major turning point right there. Priesthood out, philosophy in.
Pretty much. That moment seems to have completely redirected him. He dove headfirst into philosophy people like Franz Brentano, and especially Edmund Husserl. Husserl's logical investigations was huge for him.
And his early academic work.
He wrote theses on psychologism and the medieval philosopher Duns Scotus. Supervised by Heinrich Rickert, he tried for a Catholic philosophy position, didn't get it.
Right, and he was an unsalaried lecturer for a bit. A private doesn't.
Exactly. And he even served briefly in World War I in a meteorological unit near the end. But the really key period professionally was after the war, 1919 to 1923.
What happened then?
He went back to the University of Freiburg as Edmund Husserl's assistant. Husserl, the guy who influenced him so much, was now his mentor, really championing his work.
So things started picking up pace, and then he moved to Marburg in 1923.
Yeah, University of Marburg. That's where he really started hammering out his central philosophical theme, this whole question of the meaning of being.
And he started attracting some pretty impressive students there too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Future stars, really. Hannah Arendt, Karl Lowith, Herbert Marcuse. Quite the circle.
And speaking of Hannah Arendt, there was the affair.
Yes,
Yeah.
that started in 1925. A 4-year affair with Arendt, who was his student, just 19 at the time.
It's striking, isn't it, that Arendt was Jewish? And Elizabeth Blockman, too, another woman he had a long relationship with.
It is, especially as you said, given his later political path, it raises a lot of questions.
And then, 1927, the big one, Being and Time.
Sign on Sight. Yeah, that book just exploded onto the scene. It wasn't just another academic work. It catapulted him into, well, the sources say, a position of international intellectual visibility.
A philosophical earthquake, as you put it earlier.
Pretty much, because in Being and Time, he's doing something radically different. Think about traditional philosophy. It often asks, why is there something rather than nothing?
Right, the big metaphysical question.
But Heidegger flips it. He asks, what does it even mean for something to be? He thought Western philosophy got totally sidetracked, treating being like some kind of ultimate thing, an entity out there,
Instead of
recognizing it as something we're intimately involved in, something we live. It's about our experience of existence.
okay, so how does he get at that? This is where Dasein comes in, right?
Exactly. Dasein, it's his key term. And it's not just a synonym for human being, it's more specific. It refers to the unique way humans exist, the type of being we possess.
Being there. That's the literal meaning, isn't it?
Yes, being there. It emphasizes that we're always already situated in a world, engaged with it, understanding it in some basic way, even before we start philosophizing. It moves away from abstract consciousness towards concrete, everyday life.
And this Dasein is always being in the world.
Always. And that's a unified concept for him being in the world, not just being plus world.
Okay, explain the in. It's not like water in a glass.
No, not physical containment. It's more like being involved in something, engaged in it. Think of being in love or being in trouble, or maybe like residing or dwelling somewhere, deep involvement.
Fork example might help here.
Right, the fork example. So when you're eating, normally you just use the fork, right?
Yeah.
You don't analyze it. It's just there, ready for its purpose.
Seamlessly part of the activity.
Exactly. Heidegger calls that ready to hand, so hand in height. It's woven into what you're doing, almost invisible.
But then,
But then the fork breaks or bends, or it's the wrong tool for the job. Suddenly, you notice it. It becomes an object of attention, something you might examine.
it stands out.
Yes, that's present at hand, for hand in height. It's no longer just part of the flow, it's an object over there. This distinction shows our primary way of being isn't detached observation, but practical engagement.
Okay, that makes sense. And he builds on this with the existentialis.
Yes, the fundamental structures of Dasein's being. First, there's understanding, Verstehen, but not intellectual understanding primarily.
More like know-how.
Exactly. Our basic ability to navigate the world, to use things, to project possibilities, to grasp meaning in a practical sense.
And attunement. That sounds emotional.
It is a Befindlichkeit. It's about how we always find ourselves already in a situation, in a certain mood, already affected by things, like being thrown into a world where things already matter, where there are opinions, stakes.
There's no perfect English word for it, they say.
Not really, no. It captures that sense of our situatedness, our moodedness.
And the third one, discourse.
Read. Discourse. This is how the world gets articulated for us, how it's structured into patterns of meaning we can recognize and communicate. It's actually what makes language, as we normally think of it, possible in the first place.
So understanding looks ahead, attunement connects us to where we find ourselves, discourse makes sense of it. How do they connect?
He pulls them together under the structure of care, or Sorge. For Heidegger, care is the fundamental constitution of Dasein. It's this unified structure of being ahead of itself, future understanding, already in the world, past attunement, and being amidst encountered things, present discourse.
It's our complete way of being engaged across time.
Precisely. Temporality is absolutely key to the structure of care.
Now, what about das, ma'am? The they.
Right. So Heidegger stresses that Dasein isn't fundamentally isolated. We are always being with others, Mitsein. That's primordial, he says, even before being an individual self.
So das man grows out of that.
Yes, Das Man is the sort of anonymous public way of being, the they self. It's how one typically acts, thinks, feels. We enjoy ourselves as they enjoy themselves. We read, see, and judge literature and art as they see and judge.
It's the pressure of conformity, the average everydayness.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The dictatorship of they, he calls it. It levels things down, prescribes our possibilities. There's some debate about influences here, Dilthey's context versus Kierkegaard's focus on the individual.
And this leads naturally to authenticity, getting away from des man.
Exactly, Eigentlichkeit, which literally means ownedness or being one's own. Authenticity for Heidegger is about taking ownership of your existence, your possibilities, your choices, rather than just going along with the crowd, with the they.
How does one achieve that, according to him? It sounds difficult.
Well, he suggests a few paths, or maybe moments that can lead towards it. Anxiety, angst, is one not fear of a specific thing, but this unsettling feeling that reveals our fundamental isolation and the groundlessness of the world.
That sounds intense.
It is. Another is confronting our finitude, our being towards death. Realizing that our time is limited forces us to think about how we are living it.
Facing mortality.
Yes. And third, there's the call of conscience, this quiet call from ourselves back to ourselves, reminding us of our potential for authenticity, revealing our guilt, not moral guilt necessarily, but a kind of debt we owe to ourselves to be authentic.
But this idea of authenticity changes later on.
It does. The term itself kind of disappears from his later work. It gets replaced or maybe transformed into this idea of erengness the event or the appropriating event, which is more about how being itself happens, a cosmic play of revealing and concealing rather than individual self-ownership.
Okay, so that sounds like this famous turn in his thinking, de-care.
Yes, that's generally placed around 1930 or shortly after. The focus seems to shift from design, the individual human way of being, towards being itself, or sign, as he sometimes spelled it later, and its relationship with time.
How big a shift was it, really?
That's debated. Some see it as a major break. Others argue it's more of a change in emphasis, that many core ideas remain, just expressed in a new, sometimes even more obscure vocabulary. He retains a lot of the earlier framework, but reorients it.
So what was he focusing on after this turn?
He became deeply interested in the history of being. He wanted to trace how the understanding of what being means has changed throughout Western history from the ancient Greeks onwards.
Trying to get back to some original understanding.
Exactly. He felt the earliest Greek thinkers, like Parmenides and Heraclitus, had a more primordial experience of being that later got covered up, especially by Plato and Aristotle, who he believed falsified it by turning being into concepts or static presences. He wanted to retrieve that original insight. This leads towards what some call event ontology.
And language becomes even more important here.
Hugely important, crucial even. Remember how in being and time, language was sort of secondary to understanding?
Right.
In his later work, that changes dramatically. He starts talking about how certain basic words aren't just labels, they are world disclosive. They actually open up and structure our reality.
Which leads to that famous quote.
Language is the house of being.
Yeah.
It's not just a tool we use, it's the very medium in which being dwells and reveals itself to us.
He really pushed back against seeing language just as communication, didn't he?
Oh, completely. He saw that view as part of the problem of modern technology, flattening the world. He made this really provocative claim. It is language that speaks, not man. Man only speaks if they neatly correspond to language.
Wow. So we're participants in language, not its masters.
That's the implication. We listen to language, respond to it, rather than just wielding it.
And in this later period, he was also engaging deeply with other thinkers. Nietzsche, Hölderlin.
Yes, his lecture courses on Nietzsche are famous. He saw Nietzsche as the culmination, the endpoint of Western metaphysics, the tradition he was trying to overcome.
And Hölderlin, the poet.
Hölderlin was almost the opposite for him, a herald, someone pointing towards a different future way of thinking and being, someone whose insights hadn't really been heard yet, a prophetic voice.
It's interesting. Some scholars apparently see links between his idea of historical destiny and Marxist ideas of historical progression, millenarianism.
It's a controversial comparison, but yes. Some see a structural similarity in the idea of history moving towards a certain fulfillment or revelation, warning about the real danger of fanaticism inherent in such views.
Okay. This seems like the point where we have to turn to the most difficult part of his story, his involvement with the Nazi Party.
Yes. There's no avoiding it, and we need to be clear about the facts, based on the sources. He was elected rector of the University of Freiburg on April 21st, 1933.
And he joined the Nazi Party very soon after.
May 1st, 1933, just about 10 days later and only 3 months after Hitler had become chancellor. The sources describe him as an enthusiastic supporter during this period as rector.
And his inaugural address, the Rectoratsrede.
Delivered in a hall decked out with swastikas. In that speech, he explicitly supported the German Revolution and Adolf Hitler. It was a clear alignment.
But he resigned as rector less than a year later, in April 1934. Was that a break with Nazism?
Most historians argue no, not really. It seems to have been more about administrative frustrations, conflicts with Nazi officials over university policies, maybe feeling his vision for the university wasn't being implemented, not a principled stand against the regime itself.
And crucially, he remained a member of the Nazi Party.
Until 1945, yes,
Yeah.
even after resigning the rectorship. Hans Sluga points out this sort of duality. Apparently, he stopped some anti-Semitic posters and book burnings on campus.
Okay.
But at the same time, he was signaling sympathy with the goals of the Nazi student leaders. It's complex, but the support was definitely there.
How did Heidegger himself explain it later?
In a reflection written in 1945, he framed it as an attempt to see something positive in the movement, something that might lead to a, quote, concentration on the Germans' Western historical essence. He admitted he genuinely believed that was possible back then.
And the relationship with Husserl during this time, his Jewish mentor.
That's a particularly painful episode. Husserl, who had done so much for Heidegger's career, he was suspended from the university by the regional Nazi Gauleiter in April 1933. Soon after, a national Reich law forced all Jewish professors out.
Did Heidegger, as rector, have a role in that?
He didn't initiate the firing, it was a national law, but he did implement it at Freiburg. And crucially, he broke off personal contact with Husserl.
And the dedication in being and time.
He removed it in the 1941 edition, just gone. Though it's fair to note it was restored in editions after the war.
Hannah Arendt's reaction was strong initially, wasn't it?
Very. She initially called him a potential murderer, blaming him partly for Husserl's decline, but she did later walk that back somewhat. Heidegger himself expressed regret later for not showing gratitude to Husserl in his final illness.
So even after stepping down as rector, his involvement didn't entirely cease.
No. He remained in the party. He joined the Academy for German Law's Committee for the Philosophy of Law. This group was involved in discussions related to Nazi legal theory, including things like the Nuremberg racial laws.
That's significant.
It is. And then there's the infamous 1935 lecture, later published as Introduction to Metaphysics.
The one with the line about the inner truth and greatness of the movement.
That's the one. He spoke of the inner truth and greatness of this movement. Later, when it was published, he added a parenthesis clarifying this referred to the encounter between planetary technology and modern humanity.
But that clarification wasn't in the original lecture.
No. Scholars checked the lecture notes. It seems very likely it was a post-war addition to try and reframe what he'd said in 1935, a way to distance the comment from direct endorsement of Nazism as such.
And there are accounts from people who met him later in the 30s.
Yes. Karl Lowith, his former student, met him in Rome in 1936. Lowith reported Heidegger was wearing a swastika pin and openly expressed his continued faith in Hitler. Lowith felt Heidegger explicitly linked his political support to his philosophy of history.
Did Heidegger subscribe to the biological racism of the Nazis?
He explicitly rejected biologically grounded racism. However, he substituted it with an emphasis on linguistic historical heritage and the destiny of the German Volk, which still obviously had strong nationalist and exclusionary implications.
So after the war ended, consequences.
Oh, yes. He was dismissed from his university position in 1945 by the French occupation authorities. Then the university's denazification committee banned him from teaching until 1951. He was officially classified as a Mitläufer, a fellow traveler, or sympathizer.
And there's that controversial lecture in 1949.
Yes, highly controversial. He made a comparison where he seemed to equate the industrialization of agriculture, the manufacture of hydrogen bombs, and the mechanized production of corpses in Nazi gas chambers and extermination camps.
So you're equating those things.
The context was about the essence of modern technology reducing everything to standing reserve. But equating the Holocaust, even metaphorically, with agriculture caused understandable outrage. It seemed to trivialize the unique horror.
Yet, despite all this, he later met with Paul Celan, the poet and Holocaust survivor.
He did in 1967. Celan visited him. It's a complex and much-discussed meeting.
And the Der Spiegel interview. That was a big public statement, right? But published after his death.
Exactly. Conducted in 1966, published in 1976. In it, he defended his actions during the rectorship, claiming he was trying to save the university from being completely politicized, trying to steer things from within. He claimed he changed his mind about Nazism in 1934.
And the inner truth and greatness line.
He claimed that was a kind of doublespeak, meant only for those who could truly understand, referring to the deeper issues of technology, not the Nazi Party itself.
But how credible were those defenses?
Well, the interviewers at the time didn't have access to a lot of the evidence we have now, like Loeth's account or details about the law committee, and his claim of a clean break in 1934 seems contradicted by his continued party membership and statements like the one to Loeth.
And then, much more recently, the Black Notebook surfaced.
Yes, De Schwarzenheft, published starting in 2014. These were his private philosophical notebooks, spanning decades from 1931 into the 1970s.
And they contained
Explicitly anti-Semitic passages, really disturbing things. Talk about world Judaism being ungraspable and wielding influence behind the scenes.
specific examples.
He wrote things like, world Judaism doesn't need to get involved in military action while continuing to unfurl its influence, whereas we are left to sacrifice the best blood of the best of our people. And another entry suggests Jews promoted the kind of calculative thinking that was now being used against them, so they couldn't complain.
That's incredibly damning.
It caused a huge uproar, understandably. It reopened the whole debate about the connection between his philosophy and his anti-Semitism. Some scholars pointed to passages where he seemed to critique Husserl's philosophy as being limited by his Jewishness.
Though apparently there were also entries criticizing biological racism in the notebooks, too.
Yes, it's not monolithic. There are passages critical of the Nazis' crude biological racism.
Yeah.
But the presence of this clear philosophical anti-Semitism complicates his legacy profoundly.
Moving away from the political for a moment.
Yeah.
His personal life sounds quite complex, too. Married, but these other long relationships.
Yes. Married Elfriede Petri in 1917, they had 2 sons, though interestingly, the sources note that the second son, Hermann, was biologically the son of a family friend, Friedel Caesar, but Heidegger raised him as his own.
And he maintained connections with Elizabeth Blockman and Hannah Arendt.
Yes, throughout much of his life. Both women, as we noted, were Jewish. It adds another layer of complexity, or perhaps contradiction, to the picture. He clearly had a wide circle of friends and influenced many people personally as well as intellectually.
He died in 1976.
Yes, died in 76 and was buried back in his hometown, Meeskirch, with a Catholic service.
So summing up his influence, despite everything, it's massive, isn't it?
Undeniably, he's consistently ranked as one of the most significant, maybe the most significant philosopher of the 20th century. People like Richard Rorty, Simon Critchley, major figures acknowledge his huge impact.
Especially in France. Existentialism, deconstruction.
Hugely influential there. Sartre drew heavily on being and time for being and nothingness, even though Heidegger himself later distanced himself from Sartre's interpretation, saying it misunderstood Dasein.
He didn't like being called an existentialist.
Not really, no. He felt it focused too much on the human subject. And then there's Derrida and deconstruction. Derrida's engagement with Heidegger is absolutely fundamental to his own work.
And the influence pops up in surprising places today. AI, robotics.
Yeah, Hubert Dreyfus famously used Heidegger's ideas of being in the world and practical coping, ready to hand, to critique early approaches to artificial intelligence, arguing that intelligence isn't just symbol manipulation, but embodied know-how. It's influenced situated robotics, too.
And Steve Bannon, Really?
Apparently so. Bannon has mentioned Heidegger, possibly drawn to his critiques of modernity and technology, or maybe his ideas about historical destiny. It shows the odd range of his influence.
What about East Asian thought connections there?
There's definitely interest. He had direct contact with Japanese philosophers from the Kyoto School. And some scholars argue you can see unacknowledged echoes of Taoism or Zen Buddhism in his later ideas about letting be and language. And figures like Alexander Dugin in Russia also draw on him. It's wide-ranging.
Okay, but alongside the massive influence, there was also massive criticism from the very beginning, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even his mentor, Husserl, eventually felt Heidegger had reduced phenomenology to just philosophical anthropology, losing its rigor. And analytic philosophers like A.J. Ayer basically dismissed his work as unverifiable metaphysics.
Wasn't there a famous debate with Ernst Cassirer?
Yes, the Davos Disputation in 1929, a clash between Cassirer's neo-Kantian emphasis on rationality and symbolic forms, and Heidegger's focus on finitude, anxiety, and the pre-rational foundations of existence. Heidegger sort of won in the eyes of many observers at the time.
But the Anglo-American analytic tradition mostly rejected him.
Largely, yes. Logical positivists like Rudolf Carnap were scathing. Carnap accused him of creating an illusory ontology based on nonsensical pseudo-propositions. Bertrand Russell famously called him an obscurantist and said his language just ran riot. Obscure and meaningless, basically.
What about critiques from the left, the Frankfurt School?
They were also highly critical. Thinkers like Georg Lukács, Theodor Adorno, Jürgen Habermas, they associated his thought with irrationalism, criticized its lack of social critique, and saw dangerous political implications, linking it sometimes directly to his Nazis.
Other specific criticisms? People felt he neglected certain things.
Yes, quite a few. Emmanuel Levinas, another former student, criticized him profoundly for neglecting ethics, the face-to-face encounter with the other. Merleau-Ponty felt he neglected the body. Lucy Gray criticized his lack of attention to sexual difference. Peter Sloterdijk argued he neglected the dimension of space. So lots of different angles of critique.
Wow. So we've really covered a lot of ground, from these incredibly deep, influential philosophical ideas, Dasein, being in the world, authenticity, the history of being, language,
Ideas that genuinely shifted the course of 20th century thought.
to the undeniable, deeply troubling reality of his actions and statements regarding Nazism and anti-Semitism. It's a lot to hold together.
It really is. His philosophy is profound, challenging, still resonates today. But his life, his choices, they cast a permanent, unavoidable shadow. You can't really talk about one without confronting the other.
So the final question really is, for you listening, given this incredible complexity, this mix of philosophical genius and profound ethical failure, how do you approach someone like Heidegger? Can you separate the thinker from the person, the philosophy from the life? Or are they inevitably tangled together? That's something to really ponder.